Well, let's return to our top story this morning and get more reaction to yesterday's budget now from the Labour Party. And I'm joined now by the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. Hello, good morning. Lots of people would argue that the Chancellor's doing rather well. His autumn statement steadied the market, didn't scare the horses. The predictions of doom haven't yet been realised. Are we re-establishing a successful economy here?
Well, this was supposed to be a budget for growth yesterday, yet the Office of Budget Responsibility downgraded the growth forecasts. And it is growth that we desperately need in our economy to lift living standards, to keep taxes low and to have the money that we need for our public services. That's why Labour have made growth the number one mission for an incoming Labour government led by Keir Starmer, an ambition to have the highest sustained growth in the G7 with our plans, for example, our Green Prosperity Plan, our plans to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business, and our reform to business rates. Practical things to lift growth off the floor where it's been this last decade or so.
But, you know, the Chancellor, in terms of business, announced the fact that businesses can expend huge amounts of their outgoings now. That will help growth, won't it?
Well, obviously, it's not as generous as the scheme that it is replacing, but we do, of course, welcome any support to help businesses invest. It was what businesses were calling for. It's indeed what I called for at the Manufacturing Make UK conference just last week. But businesses want certainty. And the problem with business taxes these last few years is they've gone up and down like a yo-yo, with changes on not just an annual basis, but even twice a year over the last year, with corporation tax up and then down, with investment allowances in and then out. And this is no way to run a business taxation system, because investment decisions are made years in advance, and yet businesses have no certainty under this government of what taxes are going to be years in advance. It's why we've said that we would set out a tax framework for businesses that would last a parliament and wouldn't just change every single budget.
But the government clearly seems to have been listening to Labour. They've nicked your childcare policy. You must be pleased about that.
We are. Of course, where the government borrows Labour policies, I'm going to welcome them, whether that is on freezing gas and electricity bills, the long overdue changes to prepayment meters so that people aren't charged more if they're on prepayment meters, and the childcare policies, because you'll know that my colleague Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, has been making the running on childcare. And as a working mum myself, I know how important it is to have affordable, flexible childcare to meet the needs of working parents. So I welcome those changes. I would say, what has taken the government so long? 13 years now of this Conservative government, and only at this stage are they beginning to recognise how important childcare is, both for children's development, but also, crucially, for our success as an economy.
What about tax thresholds? There's been some criticism of the Chancellor this morning for not unfreezing the tax thresholds. The OBR suggested this leads to essentially a 4p increase, an effective 4p increase in tax. Would Labour remove those?
What I was astonished by yesterday was that the only permanent tax giveaway was for people who can save £1 million or more in their pensions, while at the same time, as you rightly say, ordinary working people are facing the highest tax burden in 70 years and the biggest falls in living standards ever recorded in history. That is the wrong priority to give a tax.
So would Labour unfreeze these tax thresholds?
Well, look, the problem is that if I commit to do anything like that, I have to say where the money's going to come from. And so I come back to where I started this interview.
So you won't say you will?
Well, let me answer the question. I come back to where I started in the interview. We've got to grow the economy, because it is only through growing the economy that you can keep taxes low, improve living standards and have the money for public services. That's why we've made it the number one mission of an incoming Labour government. If the economy had grown at the same rates these last 13 years that they did under the last Labour government, the average family would have £5,000 more in their pockets than they do today. That is how important growth is. And so, yes, I want to reduce the burden of taxes on working people, but I'm honest in saying that that's got to be through economic growth. and we've got a plan to get that growth.
But you see, it's difficult for viewers because we've had a number of Labour politicians on this sofa this week, and when I've asked every single one of you to try and nail your colours to the mast on a particular policy, how much it will cost, for example, and there are no figures, and we're only 18 months out of an election, people want to know whether the Labour Party will reduce their taxes. They need to know a yes or no answer, don't they?
Well, look, if I started making commitments without saying where the money was going to come from, you'd rightly say that's a bit Liz Truss.
But then it sounds like you're making no commitments.
Well, no. So, for example, we've said that we would reverse these changes to the pensions tax relief because we don't think it's the right priority to give a tax break to the wealthiest 1% when ordinary people are seeing their living standards decline. It's why we've said that we would extend the windfall tax on the huge profits that the energy giants are making and use that money, around £10 billion, to help people with the cost of living crisis. Fully funded, fully costed plans, because that is the right approach. We saw what happened last year when the Conservatives crashed the economy, and that's had lasting effects with people paying, the OBR confirmed this yesterday, £2,000 more a year in mortgage payments because of what the Conservatives did last year. So I will always say where the money's going to come from. We'll always put a fiscal responsibility and economic responsibility as the rock upon which all our announcements are made. I'm not going to play fast and loose with the public finances in the way that the Conservatives have done.
Back on this pensions cap, it's something of a U-turn for Labour, isn't it? Because back in September, your Health Secretary, the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said that the party would abolish the cap on doctors' pensions. I've got a quote actually from him.
On doctors, that's the key point, Jane.
On doctors' pensions.
What the government have done, though, Jane, is a tax bung for the richest 1%, whether they're doctors or doing any other job. We want to ensure that doctors can work extra hours, but the British Medical Association themselves gave evidence to the Health and Social Care Select Committee last year, showing that that could be done for a fraction of the cost of what the government announced yesterday. You don't need to spend £1 billion helping the richest 1% when there is a fix that can be made for doctors to ensure that they can work the hours we need them to work.
But isn't it true that in the public sector, people with these massive pension pots tend to be people that have come from the public sector because they are the ones that have these huge pension schemes as part of their jobs?
No,
there are fewer people from the... There are some, but
there's plenty of people in the private sector. It's interesting the government, of course, refused to publish all the details on this yesterday, but the British Medical Association themselves gave evidence to the Select Committee last year showing that this could be done for a fraction of the cost. There's already a bespoke scheme, for example, for judges, for their pensions. We could have a bespoke scheme for doctors to ensure that they work extra hours without spending £1 billion in helping people with more than £1 million worth of pension savings. That can't be the right priority. That's why we're forcing a vote on it in the House of Commons next Tuesday, and why we've said that we would reverse these changes if Labour were to form the next government.
OK, and briefly before we let you go, just a word about Credit Suisse. How worried should we be about a potential financial crisis after what's happened there?
I am very concerned about what's happened in the last week with Silicon Valley Bank, with Signature Bank, and now the issues at Credit Suisse. We've said that the government need to look at the impact of rapidly rising interest rates on our financial stability, and I would urge them to work with Treasury departments and central banks around the world to ensure that there is the liquidity in markets, that depositors are protected, and that we preserve our hard-won financial stability.
Rachel Reeves, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.